What up, y'all? It's Dad from the place. We like it as stuff. Got another probably early morning new Capenna preview video for you here. Sorry about that. We're still in a weird internet situation, so stuff that would normally come out at like 10 p.m. is coming out at like 9 a.m. We're using an internet hotspot to upload videos, which is not exactly optimal deck building. So thanks for sticking with us this season. But with that out of the way, we got another like 25 cards to look at from New Capenna today. And a lot of really, really good stuff. Again, lower rarity stuff looks pretty tight in this set, especially the uncommons. A lot of very, very good uncommons in this set so far, and a bunch of really good-looking rares. Some wacky stuff, yeah, but some actually good, constructed, playable gems too. So let's jump into it. Okay, now we can talk about cards. Here's Celebrity Fencer, the first card of the day, but not the worst card of the day, not necessarily. This is 4 mana, 3 and a white for a 3/2 elf druid with Alliance. Whenever another creature ETBs under your control, you put a +1/+1 counter on Fencer. I'd like to know exactly what the flavor is here, unless that's a purposeful double entendre. If it is, good on them. Does it fence items like a pawnbroker, or is it a fencer? Is she like a swords person? I'd like to know. Maybe she's both. Maybe the idea is that the more people that come in and sell her weapons, the more powerful she gets. Is that the flavor? I don't know. The card's probably a little bit too expensive, to be honest, but it is cool in a set with a bunch of token generation and ways to put creatures into play and all that. Cards that put multiple creatures into play, and we already had plenty of those in Standard. This is actually really sweet. You know, follow this up, burn down the house on the next turn and put 3 of those devils into play, and suddenly she's huge. But she does have to get pretty big to offset her relatively poor toughness for the casting costs. So I think you have to put like at least 3 creatures into play before this is worth your time, and there's probably better 4-drop options, to be honest. So I'm not sure it sees much Standard play, but this might be a signpost common. I was going to say uncommon. It's actually a common for multiple limited decks in this environment. Up next, Social Climber here. This is 3 mana, 2 and a green for a 3/2 human druid with an Alliance. Whenever another creature ETBs under your control, you gain 1 life. So it's a prosperous innkeeper that costs more mana and is too good to give you a treasure token. You're supposed to give it treasure tokens, apparently. Gotta kiss the ring here. I don't know if it's worth playing this card in like the green-white life gain decks that already play Prosperous Innkeeper and stuff, but at least it's worth trying to get another iteration of this effect. But I kind of have my doubts. At least it's more powerful than a Prosperous Innkeeper, swings better on a naked board, cruise vehicles better. I mean, there's good things to like about this, but end of the day, I think I'd probably just rather play Innkeeper, and this could be copies 5 through 8, but I don't know that it needs to be. Next, I'll pause briefly to talk about Attended Socialite. This is 1 and a green for a 2/1 elf druid with Alliance. Whenever another creature ETBs under your control, Attended Socialite gets +1/+1 till end of turn. So we've actually seen effects like this just recently, but I do like that this is an elf. I want to point that out. Pretty decent in all kinds of elves decks, but I don't know if you can find a slot for it in many elves decks in like other formats or Commander or whatever. In Standard, however, we've got some cool stuff to go with this. You know, got Tyvar Kell putting an elf into play every turn. We've got multiple elves that make elves when you play elves, and I don't know, this could work, is all I'm saying. If you could get this up to like a 4-power creature on most turns, up to turn 6 or 7, then I think you're doing really well, and there's multiple, ways to put 4 or 5 power on this thing in a turn. It doesn't get to wear them as counters the way Celebrity Fencer does, but it is much cheaper to cast in the first place, and it's probably going to be in play on the turns where you're actually putting a lot of creatures into play, rather than being like a 4-mana investment like Celebrity Fencer. So, and it's got the right creature type and stuff too. It's just, I'm probably a little too excited about this, but Standard Elves has tried to be a deck since Forgotten Realms came out, and it just really can't be one. So anytime I see an Elves 2-drop that looks even sort of kind of halfway playable, I probably speculated about it way too much. Now let's look at Body Dropper next. This is 2 mana, a black and a red for a 2/2 Devil Warrior. Whenever you sacrifice another creature, you put a +1/+1 counter on the drop. You can also pay a black and a red, sacrifice another creature to have the dropper gain menace till end of turn. This is obviously a sweet card. Is this not your favorite card of the day, Dev? You love stuff like this. I do. I do. And to be honest, part of me thinks, well, this is going to be a 5/5 before you know it. And it might be. It might be. I think this is a creature that Aristocrat stacks have kind of wanted for a little while in Standard, so I'm really excited to play it. Although, maybe I'm just spoiled and I want it a little bit more. I don't think you're going to drop this from a lot of your Aristocrats lists, but I do think that it's a little slower than I wanted it to be. I don't know what I want from Magic cards anymore. Maybe that's it. But this thing is obviously very, very exciting. What I wanted was Blood Artist. Just give me like a real an actual blood artist, and I'll be really excited. But just as far as an Aristocrats 2-drop that grows easily throughout the game, plays really well with all your deadly disputes, your shambling ghast, your eye twitches, any of your sack outlets and your sack payoffs. This plays super well alongside, so I'm happy about it. It's self-enabling, gives itself a sort of evasive ability. If it gets big enough, then your opponent might be able to block it with 2 guys. You just kill both those guys. So there's a lot of things to get excited about when it comes to this card. I just think maybe I wanted the activated ability to be a little bit better. But to be honest, if the activated ability wasn't on the card at all, I'd still be very excited about it. So I don't know what my problem is. The card looks actually quite good. But we're taking a look at Brazen Upstart next. This is just Naya colors, so green, a red, and a white for a 4/2 Elf Shaman with Vigilance. And when it dies, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them, put it into your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So a 3-mana 4/2 with at least a decent creature type that also replaces itself and has like an okay keyword ability. Like altogether, the card is fine in terms of what you're actually paying, what you're actually getting. And the toughness is a little bit low, but it's going to trade in combat with most things. It doesn't attack as well as I'd like it to, but it blocks super well for the mana value, and there's a ton of opposing 3-drops that have 4 toughness that I think this lines up relatively well with. So all things considered, it's cool. If it does trade in combat, then it's already replaced itself with a decent creature, hopefully decent creature. And if you can attack profitably, that's 4 damage for your 3-mana investment. I just think there's kind of nothing to not like about this card. The toughness, again, is like the obvious downside, but I don't think that's enough of a downside to make me hate this thing. I just sure do love value, but I also love decent removal, like Fatal Grudge here. This is Rakdos colors, black and a red for a sorcery. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a non-land permanent. Each opponent chooses a permanent they control that shares a type with the sacked permanent and sacks it, and then you draw a card. That's actually what kind of makes this card for me. It would be much farther down the list otherwise, but the ability to sack a small creature, again, maybe an Eye Twitch, Shambling Ghast, something that gives you some value, make your opponent sacrifice something. Hopefully they only have a couple of dudes out and no tokens or whatever. Make your opponent sack something, and you draw a card. That's actually pretty decent. The cantrip effect on this probably makes it worth the include in your deck. It's probably doesn't line up the way I want it to some of the time. I want to say you can sacrifice a treasure token to this and kill an Asika's Chariot, but what if your opponent has a treasure token or a clue token from their Brybridge tracker or whatever, So this isn't going to line up perfectly all of the time, and some of the time you won't have an enchantment that you don't mind sacrificing to kill their wedding announcement or whatever. So again, if they have a great planeswalker, you won't always have a planeswalker that you want to sacrifice. But maybe you have a copy of that new Ob Nixilis you don't mind sacking and kill their planeswalker. I don't know. There's definitely ways this lines up, and it's probably decent in Aristocrats deck. Alongside Body Dropper, you also get a +1/+1 counter. So, I don't know, there's ways that I like this card, but is it better in, even a Black-Red Aristocrats deck than just a traditional removal spell? I'm not too sure yet, but I do think the card's cool. Up next, let's look at Stimulus Package. What are you doing all the way up here in the video, buddy? It's 4 mana, 2 a green and a red for an enchantment. When an ETBs, create 2 treasure tokens, but you can sacrifice a treasure to create a 1/1 green and white citizen creature token. There's treasure tokens everywhere. We got cards in this set that create treasure tokens, that 2 mana 2/2 that taps to create treasure tokens. We just saw it yesterday. It basically taps to create creatures now, in a way. And that's what I like about this, is creatures like Kalain and other things that put treasure tokens into play when they ETB, or for instance Magda. They all now create creatures, theoretically, as long as you have this thing out. And I think that's really, really cool. It also pays for itself, kind of. It doesn't really cost 4 mana, so it's not a do-nothing. You at least get the 2 treasures. If you have a Goldspan in play, it just pays for itself immediately. So there's that to think about. And Goldspan creates 1/1s now as well. It's just, I don't know, guys. If it didn't create the 2 treasure tokens, it would probably be Garbo, but altogether, I think it's a very sweet card, actually. But, technically, you think about this as an explosive vegetation, right? Or something like that, right? Like a 4 mana ramp you 2, right? So that's also kind of sweet. I don't know. I think this is actually a much better card than it might look like to some people. So I like this. The next turn, you can theoretically have, you can go from 4 to 7 mana. So if you ramp into this with a static ramper like Tangled Florahedron or something. If you ramp into this on turn 3, then yeah, you can end up having what, like 6 mana on turn 4, something like that. So I don't know, just a sweet card. I could think about it all day. There's a lot of ways I want to spend that stimmy, so I'm into it. But let's look at Rocco next, baby. Rocco Cabaret Caterer. I love all the chef stuff they've been dabbling around in lately. Rocco is X and Naya colors, green, a white, and a red, for a 3/1 elf druid. Now, when it ETBs, if you cast it, you can tutor for a creature with mana value X or less and put it onto the battlefield and then shuffle. That is sick. That is quite good. I like a lot of these uncommon legends in this set. This is good as a commander. It's especially good as like a brawl commander or something. But where, commander at large, I think this card probably gets eaten alive by a lot of other more optimized lists. But in brawl, it might have a chance. But even in just like standard constructed Magic at large, I think this has a chance too. You don't even have to, I don't think, be ramping in your deck. Just once you get to 5 mana, this plus any 2-drop in your deck is actually really sweet. So I like that a lot. But if you do have extra mana, it either goes and gets a big creature, or it gets like a 3 and 4 drop with an ETB ability. It can go get a 4-drop with haste and swing like pretty heavy the first turn. Like, there's some cool things about this that I like a lot. And I think that in like a Naya mid-range deck, this might end up seeing 1 or 2 of play. It's great when drawn off the top after a sweeper, get you right back on board and force another sweeper. So if you search for the right thing, you might go search for something that puts something else on the battlefield. So you got that going for you. Even if you just go get like a Luminarch Aspirant for a total of 5 mana, I think you're doing good. So I'm a big fan of Rocco. There's just a couple of other commons and uncommons today, but as usual, I think the commons and uncommons are some of the best cards of the day. So let's look at Tainted Indulgence next to prove my point. This is a black and a blue for an instant. You draw 2 cards, then you discard a card unless there are 5 or more mana values among cards in your yard. So most of the previous season so far, this like graveyard threshold thing has been mostly poo-poo cards that have like this condition on them. This is great. Like, this is incredible at instant speed cast, even just on turn 2, in like a Reanimator deck. It's not Faithful Mending or anything, but it does a pretty good impression of Faithful Mending. 2 mana to just draw the top 2 cards is good, even if you have to discard a card, and it's especially good at instant speed. But in a Reanimator deck, or any deck really that's filling its graveyard quickly, you can probably hit this threshold fast. So later on in the game, starting turn 5, 6, 7, whatever, you can probably just cast this for 2 mana, instant speed, draw 2, and then it's amazingly powerful. 2 mana at instant speed for draw 2 is just an incredible rate, especially in today's standard Magic. But I would posit too, again, that even before that threshold, cast on turn 2, this is a perfectly serviceable card for black control decks that might want to throw a flashback card in the yard or something. Or again, Reanimator decks that throw a big fat guy in there. So just love everything about this. For 2 mana, it's an incredible rate, no matter what, basically. But oh, my favorite lower rarity card of the day, everybody. Let's take a look at Wily Taunter. This is 3 mana, 2, and a red for a 3/2 Devil Citizen with Alliance. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Wily Taunter deals 1 damage to each opponent. There it is. There's the thing that I wanted. The moment I saw the Alliance ability, I wanted really like a side reprint, or just a full-on reprint, of Impact Tremors, right? They'd have to make it a side reprint to slap the Alliance ability on it, but whatever. I just wanted this card back, and we've got it with some caveats. It costs 50% more mana, and it's more killable than an Impact Tremors. All of those things suck, but that doesn't keep me from being excited about this thing. I want to play it on stream. I want to have multiple copies of it and play a burn down the house or something else that makes a bunch of tokens, I want to kill people with this card. I have missed Impact Tremors so much. It was the, centerpiece of so many of my favorite budget decks that we've done on this channel throughout the years. Impact Tremors is, in some ways, one of my favorite Magic cards of all time, so even when we get a bad impression of it, I get very excited. I know this isn't the best lower rarity card of the day, but it's easily my favorite, and it's not even close. Just can't wait to get some games in with Dr. Wily. But let's move on to the rares and mythics from today, and I will start with a card that I will concede is probably not the worst rare or mythic of the day. People are excited about it in Modern. I don't know if they should be, but let's look first at Shadow of Mortality. This is a letdown, in my opinion, from Morrow's teaser. We knew there was going to be a card that cost 13 black. This is that card. It costs that much, and it's a 7/7 avatar. If your life total is less than your starting life total, this spell costs X less to cast, where X is the difference. So, if you're at 7, it costs 2 to cast, right? If you're at 10, it costs 5. That's still not good. That's not good. If you're at 8, it costs 3, I guess. Like, am I mathing correctly here? I think so. It's still just a vanilla 7/7 though, right? It's not Death Shadow. Am I crazy? It's not Death Shadow at all. Am I allowed to not like this in any way? I was really hoping the 13 black thing would actually be a decent reanimation target and not like reduce the cost of the spell by this much. We all knew it was going to be that, but I was kind of hoping it wasn't. And fake Death Shadow is not necessarily something that I had on the menu. Death Shadow at home, whatever you want to call this card. Just a big, not kind of a big old pile of poop on a plate, I think. You're allowed to be excited about this card. And again, I think that people have outlined like modern combos with this. So there are things on the menu, I think, with the card. As a standard player, I want to like this better than I do like it. Now, I think that there is a black deck that does damage to itself. There's a name for this deck, but I can't say it or I'll get demonetized on YouTube. It's from 30 years ago. It's a deck that people from back then have always wanted to exist again. But it hasn't. It hasn't existed since 1998. So I don't know what to tell you. A lot of people want that deck to come back, and this might be another signpost for the mono black aggro deck, but I don't even know about there. It just seems like it's going to sit in your hand all game and just not be very good in fact. So I want to like it. I'm trying to like it super hard. Can't do it. But today was not the best day for black rares, I don't think, because the next card I want to look at is Sanguine Spy. This card is fine. Hold on, calm down. This is 3 mana, 2 and a black for a vampire rogue. It's a 2/3 with menace and lifelings. Not bad keywords. You can pay 1 and sack another creature to look at the top card of your library. You may put that card into your graveyard. At the beginning of your end step, if there are 5 or more different mana values among cards in your graveyard, you may pay 2 life. If you do, draw a card. So, not a bad ability. It's kind of a super Visceracia, and yes, I do like the Surveil reference on the Spy. Very, very cute, and I see what you're doing. Honestly, this is another one that I really want to like. I want to like this so much, but it's a lot for the stat line, especially. 3 mana is kind of more than you think it is a lot of the time, especially for a 2/3, even with these keyword abilities. And they are good keyword abilities, but I'm not sure they save the card. I want to be able to have a free sacrifice outlet, and they keep taxing us for sacrifice outlets. This 1 mana sack a creature is the least you could possibly pay if you're going to pay, but I'm sorry, it dampers my spirit slightly when I see that I have to pay for the sack on this. And I will say, if you could just sacrifice stuff without having to pay mana, it wouldn't be that broken. I don't think this card would be, but it would enable a lot of stuff that might seem broken. But that's what I want. I want Aristocrats to actually be a powerful deck in the format. And all of this restraint, this holding back, this pay mana for your sacrifice outlets doesn't help, especially when they cost 3 mana to get in play in the first place. Aside from that, I also think this is another card that's too good. It's too good for you to give you a good ability. I'm over it. This card is above giving you a good ability without making you jump through hoops. You get to draw an extra card off of this every turn if you fulfill a relatively hard condition to fulfill. And if you do fulfill that condition, you have to pay 2 life. Like, come on, man. Why? It's 1 extra card. If I fulfill the condition, just give me the card. Why is it 2 life? There's just too many things about this card that kind of, even as an Aristocrats player that's looking for a piece just like this, I still hate it. Hate is a strong word. Again, I think the card is fine, but that's kind of the problem. The card is just fine, and it needed to be just a little bit better. Let's look at Aven Heartstabber next here. This is 2 mana, a black and a blue for a 1/1 flying bird assassin. And as long as there are 5 or more mana values among cards in your graveyard, Heartstabber gets +2/+2 and has Death Touch. When Heartstabber dies, mill 2 cards, then draw a card. Nothing technically wrong with this card, right? I mean, compare it to Spirited Companion, right? And this one is difficult to Vanishing Verse, so I do think you'll get the dies trigger a good bit on this card, right? Even if your opponent could spend a Vanishing Verse on this, I think you'd like that. Just a 1/1 flyer, right? But they can't even do that. So I think this is actually a pretty cool card here. I'm not sure what it slots into. It doesn't really have great creature types. Like if it were a rogue, maybe, but it doesn't have great creature types, but it's still interesting in like a blue-black mid-range deck of some kind. It's a great sack target for things that have like Casualty 1 or something, right? Decent in like an Aristocrats pile. Like there's some things to think about here. But altogether, I'm just not sure it's going to find a great home. But I do think the card is great. These 2-mana things that draw a card, and in this case, this one also gives you some graveyard gas. That's kind of cool. You know, it's got a good keyword ability. Flying is great. Blocks everything in the world. So I can't not like this card, theoretically, but I just don't know that I can right now envision a home for it. There is a blue-black control deck, kind of a tempo deck that's cooking up right now that uses like Make Disappear and perhaps a little chat, you know, some things that I think look decent for that deck, and Heartstabber might go in there, but how good is that deck at the end of the day? I'm not too sure. But up next, let's look at Park Heights Pegasus right here. Just 2 mana, green and a white for a 2/1 Pegasus with Flample. 2/1 Flample for 2 mana. Whenever Park Heights Pegasus deals combat damage to a player, draw a card if 2 or more creatures entered the battlefield under your control this turn. So all day, I thought this was, I don't know why, but my brain thought this was 3 mana. I thought it was 1, a green and a white, and I hated it. Again, hate is a strong word, but for 2 mana, now that I'm seeing that, I don't know what was wrong with my head. I think I have a tumor this spoiler season, but for 2 mana, this is actually pretty good. You don't see a whole lot of green flyers for just 2 mana, but it's also got Flample, so, if you Anthem effect or put an aura on it, for instance, then it's probably pretty decent in that case. Because just an initial 2 mana investment for a 2/1 flyer is already, I think, a great mana value. There's nothing wrong with 2 mana for a 2/1 flyer in these, especially in these colors. But that's not playable on its own anymore. I think we've learned that lesson. But the ability to draw a card every now and again is actually really sweet. I don't know. I think this is a sweet card that could fit into these various like Selesnya mid-range decks that we see kind of going around nowadays. And a lot of those decks are tokens decks, just with a Seeker's Chariot. This seems really, really good, right? A Seeker's Chariot just automatically puts 2 dudes into play, so you'll definitely draw the card. I think this is actually very sweet and is probably destined to see some amount of standard play. So love this thing. I actually really like this. All day, again, I've thought this was 3 mana and I've been prepared to just chew it out, but it turns out I love this card. So let's look at Incandescent Aria next. This is 3 mana, just Naya colors, for a sorcery that deals 3 damage to each non-token creature. That is really, really interesting to think about, right? Especially in these Naya decks nowadays. Now, you can't play any actual creatures, which kind of sucks. But, starting on like turn 2 with Ranger class or whatever, you can start putting tokes on the board. It's great with like a Seeker's Chariot. There's all these really powerful cards, Wedding Announcement, that this is really, really good with. So I wouldn't be surprised to see this. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised to see it in a deck that plays a few creatures that it kills, a 1 or a 2 drop, perhaps. But one way or the other, just in your basic Naya tokens deck, this looks like an incredible sweeper that is good starting on turn 3, right? And a lot of these Naya tokens decks won't really start doing good stuff until turn 3, 4, 5 anyway. So this allows you to just blow away all the aggro stuff on turn 3 if you want to, and then get to playing, your Stensia Uprising, Wedding Announcement, all your token creating stuff. While at the same time, you could also rip this on turn 6 and play it then, and just like one-sided Wrath and win the game. So there's just so many cool things about this card. I like it a lot. But up next, it continues to be not a great day for black mythics and rares and such, but this is at least one that I am very excited about, but I don't know how good it actually is. Let's look at Angel of Anguish next. 5 mana, 3 and 2 black for a 5/3 flying Nightmare Angel. Those are great creature types. And if you would be dealt damage, prevent that damage and mill twice that many cards instead. Super cool, guys. I really like this. If your opponent does hit you with damage, yeah, it might just take a couple of combat steps to kill you or whatever. It's not a Platinum Angel. You can still lose the game pretty easily, but in the meantime, they're probably doing you a favor by putting a bunch of cards in your graveyard. You can then reanimate or flash back or do whatever you want to do with them. Your graveyard is pretty easy to use as a resource, and I could see turning this around on your opponent, like judo style, use their momentum against them by casting like a Harness Infinity a couple of turns later, and then just get all you got. It's a lot of cards. That's so many cards. And of course, there's plenty of ways to just like put all the cards from your graveyard back into your library. Not necessarily in Standard, but in other formats there are. In Standard, we do have some ways of getting cards from our graveyard back into our library. So I love this. I love this so much. It is a little weird because you want to play it and then be able to, cast sweepers and stuff. But you can't. If you cast sweepers, then this will die. I guess you can cast that new Grixis sweeper, right? You can do that. You can cast that new Grixis sweeper and it survives that. But one way or the other, I think this card is cool to think about, but the 3 toughness probably makes it just this massive liability. I think 5 mana is probably too much for the card, right? So there are definitely things that make me think this card is not destined for top table Standard play or anything. But I am still a lot of ways that kitchen table player. I am still that 11-year-old in 1995, just playing like cards I thought were cool at my friend's house. And that part of me, that casual Timmy, just loves this card. Now I want to look at Extraction Specialist next. This is where we get into some cards that I think are very, very good. This is 3 mana, 2 and a white for a 3/2 human rogue with lifelink. When Specialist enters the battlefield, return target creature card with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. That creature can't attack or block for as long as you control Specialists. So really neat. Now, I guess if I have one complaint before we really get into it here, it's that you want to play this in an aggro deck with a lot of 2-drops that you can get out of your graveyard, right? But that means you want to be attacking, and this actually doesn't attack very well with just the 2 toughness. I know it's got 3 power, but 2 toughness is not the best attacking body in the world in an aggro deck, especially when all the other white 3-drops are so good right now that I don't even know if this is worth the opportunity cost in terms of curve in your deck. But this can bring back stuff like Luminarch Aspirant. And that doesn't have to attack to be relevant, obviously. It can bring back the Adversary. That doesn't have to attack to be relevant. You just pump all your extra mana, if you have any, into Antheming the rest of your team with that card. So just a lot of cool stuff that this could bring back. And that's just a couple of cards. There are way more creatures you can bring back with this, even if it's just like Prosperous Innkeeper. I think it's probably worth it a lot of the time. So I like this card a lot. If you can't tell, it's a relatively low investment to bring back our potential combo piece from your graveyard, or just something else that's really relevant to your deck. And I tend to like cards like this a lot. And this is no different. I like this. Although I do kind of worry that with a few games testing with it, you might extract it from your deck. But I at least do want to test those few games with it. But I also want to look at Scheming Accomplice next. This is 2 mana, a blue and a white for a 2/3 human citizen. And look at that cheese-eating grin. Look at that smile as he enters the battlefield. Choose a non-land permanent. Activated abilities of chosen permanent can't be activated. Scheming Accomplice, this is the fun part, has all activated abilities of chosen permanent except loyalty abilities because it can't be too fun. You may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to activate them. Now, yes, if this could effectively copy an opponent's Planeswalker or something, I think it'd be really a little too much, but maybe we need that to keep Planeswalkers in check in this format. But even without copying Planeswalkers, it's still actually pretty sweet, right? Like, you can copy a Reckoner Bankbuster and like draw cards with this. And that's kind of neat, but I think that it's probably still going to shut down Planeswalkers a good bit of the time. I think this might be what this is used for. But if it's just kind of a pithing needle on a stick, then it's kind of decent just in and of itself, but still probably just like a sideboard playable card. But I really like these hate bears that make it hard for your opponent to do stuff. There's a sort of blue-white taxes deck that's cooking up in the format right now, and this might be, I don't want to say a meddling mage equivalent. It's not that. Again, like a pithing needle on a stick. I think a corn dog pithing needle is probably the best way to put this. But one way or the other, it's a sweet little card that I think will definitely have some relevance, not just in Standard, but in a lot of other formats as well. Now let's look at a card that I may be too excited for. Like maybe it's way too far up this list. But let's look at Fleetfoot Dancer next, because I am a fan of Lightning Angel. This is no Lightning Angel, but that's obviously what it's supposed to be. It's just 1 in Naya colors for a 4/4 Elf Druid with Trample and Lifelink and Haste. It's really good. Actually, that's quite good. A 4-mana 4/4 Haste is probably not great enough right now in and of itself, but Ovenwald Oddity has seen some play. Obviously, Questing Beast saw tons of play back in the day, intermittently, right? It went in and out of seeing lots of play from format to format, environment to environment. But Fleetfoot Dancer, I think, again, if there's like a Naya mid-range deck, this is a tempting 4-drop. It might not be as good as like a Nasika's Chariot a lot of the time, or even an Ulven Wild Oddity in some decks, but I think that the lifelink on this is what's going to be really, really key a lot of the time. You know, against a lot of aggro decks, I think this is just a death knell. You know, they've been attacking you most of the game, and then you can immediately attack them for, you know, just swing the game 8 life points, you know, immediately attack them for 4 with haste, get the lifelink to trample over any small guys they've left to block, and that lifelink is going to really matter. I just think this puts a lot of aggro decks out of contention the moment that you drop it. So there's that, but it's also decent against control decks, right? Because it's good on turn 3 or 4 with the haste. But if you draw it off the top of your library on turn 7 after a sweeper, it's also great then too. So I just like a lot about this. Draw it off the top of your library, and it's kind of good against Lolth decks some of the time. You know, you swing through the spiders, you kill the Lolth, you gain the life. You know, there's a lot of cool things about this card that line up kind of well with this format right now. Again, I think the lifelink is what's going to really put this card over a lot of the time. Now, I got to tell you, this next card is the next to last card of the day, amazingly, already. And just like the commons and uncommons, how I had to talk about that Impact Tremors side print was not the best card of the day, but it's my favorite card of the day. And this card is very similar, right? I don't have the stones to make it the last card we'll talk about, but it is still easily one of my favorite cards on the day, and that is Jenny Faye. And you probably knew that. I think some of you probably thought of me when you saw this card. Jenny Faye Jetmir's second is 3 mana. You can put this in a mono green deck if you wanted to. You have to pay a green mana for it, but then you have a Gruul hybrid and a Selesnya hybrid. Green-red or green-white. So 3 mana in total for your 3/3 elf druid. Lots of elves. I like to see that. If you would create 1 or more tokens, you may instead create that many 2/2 green cat creature tokens with haste, or that many 3/1 green dog creature tokens with vigilance. So I think just turning all of the tokens you could make over the course of a game into hasteds, probably ridiculous. Like, just that in and of itself is awesome. But also 3/1 vigilant guys could be good on a naked board. That's pretty sweet. You know, you're making 3 power every time you make tokens, which is great. That turns these like 2 mana things that make 1/1 tokens into potential, or 3 mana things that make, you know, 1/1 tokens into 6 power for 3 mana, or like a Join the Dance. That's 6 power potentially now with vigilance for just 2 mana, or flashbacked out of the graveyard for 5. That's still not a bad raid, right? Depending on where you are in the game. This makes Asika's Chariot pretty sweet, right? Like, on turn 3, you play this into a chariot, and even though you're still probably just making cats, like the cats have haste, and that's really, really sweet, right? Just being able to swing with them on that turn is actually kind of game-changing some of the time. But you can also turn the cats into 3/1 dogs, and that is checks notes cool as well. So I think this is actually a really sweet card, just with a bunch of stuff I've named already, but a bunch of other stuff as well. So anything that puts a bunch of tokens into play at the same time, right? Sort of March the Multitudes, or again, Burn Down the House. I keep talking about that card. Burn Down the House now puts 9 potential power into play, or 6 haste power rather than 3 haste power. So those are good upgrades. Just a sweet little card right here that I'm actually, I did open up by saying is not the best card of the day, but I'm sort of slowly talking into myself into as I get to actually talk about it out loud. Also, a good commander. People get mad at me if I don't say that for some reason. We all know it's a good commander. But it is. It's probably the Brawl commander I want to play with the most. So there is that. But we'll move on to, if you're doing the math correctly here, the best card of the day. And I really don't even think it's close. I think there's a huge degree of separation between this and the other best cards. Let's look at Void Rend. You knew it was going to be this, right? You knew it was going to be Vindicate, but better. This is 3 mana. Esper colors, a white, a blue, and a black for an instant. This spell can't be countered. Destroy target non-land permanent. Whoopsie, that's so good. Alright, so in case it's your first day, and even if it is, you still should be able to clock that this is a good Magic card, but in case it's your first day, Junior, this is the best card potentially in the set. Just uncounterable. All target removal, right? It's just can hit anything in the game, aside from lands, obviously, is stupidly very, very good. It will probably be one of the more commander-played cards in the set all day. But when you see cards like this that can hit basically any target at instant speed and cannot be countered, you have found, again, potentially one of the best cards in the entire set that they'll show us. Just Imagine if there are cards in the set they don't show us. Can you imagine? But one way or the other, just obviously the best card of the day, and it's not even like there's a ton of tech that you can outline on this card. It's really not. It's just, did the Esper deck need good cards? Did they need better cards? They already had Vanishing Verse, which does exile. They already had Rite of Oblivion if they wanted to play it, but they stopped playing that card a while back. And now they really don't have to go back to playing that card because they have this. Just destroy target non-man permanent. Spell can't be countered. That's just... Good God, good grief, everybody. Just don't know what to tell you other than Blue keeps ending the day here this spoiler season with a card that it's not that I love cards like this. It's not that I'm excited to talk about cards like this. Blue keeps ending the day with cards that I am terrified to play against. Cards that I am very scared to just have in the format in the first place. And this is definitely one of them. Nothing is safe and you can't protect it. So that's all the cards. Esper's good. Esper's really good. I, for one, welcome our new Esper Overlords. So good. But anyway, let's Magic's going to be fun for a couple of years. There are good stuff like that. You know, Naya's got some really good stuff cooking up. Not all hope is lost. There's some really good stuff in this set. There was already some dope stuff in Standard. I really enjoyed playing Standard over the last 2 months since Kamigawa's been in the format. So don't screw it up, Wizards. That's all I'm saying. But hey, if you're an Esper player, knock yourself out. I guess I am one now too. But either way, just let me know how you felt about all of the stuff that we saw today down there in the comments section. I am shook by that last card. Normally so confident, boisterous, gregarious, loquacious, but today I am shaken to my core by this Esper stuff. But again, sign off and let me know how you felt about it down there. And also do all the YouTube stuff. Like the video, share it around if you want to do that. The whole spiel. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that yet for more spoiler content. Check out the Twitch at twitch.tv/SBMTGdev. Link in the description for that. And as soon as Cox Cable gives me my internet back, then we will do a stream. I promise you. We will do a stream immediately. As soon as I see I have internet back. Oh, we got a stream. Probably not, but as soon as we can. We will do a stream, everybody. Aside from that, check out the Patreon if you want to support this content, help out around here, make the channel better, vote on content. That's an incentive. It's just $1 a month over at patreon.com/SBMTG. Again, link in the description of that. There's also links in the description to all the spoiler content that we've done so far, so get over there. But, it's going to be, hopefully, we can do all those links, because boy, is my internet slow. Either way, thanks for joining us, and I appreciate your continued patience this spoiler season. I love you all, and I will catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love. Be kind.